This is Leader Time by FedNet, the podcast for remarks by Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor. On Monday, April 20th, Thune focused on last year's tax cuts package as the GOP sought to fund immigration enforcement through reconciliation. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, Tax Day was last week, and I'd like to read a brief excerpt from a Washington Post article, I should say. The title of this article, Tax Refunds Shoot Up as Americans Take Advantage of New Deductions. And here's the excerpt, and I'll quote. Karen Richardson, 68, has had a predictable tax return since she retired from her job administering government benefits 4 years ago. She lives on a fixed income and usually owes some money at tax time, so she was surprised to get a $1,000 refund this year due to the senior deduction. The big, beautiful bill worked for me, she said. I didn't think it applied to more than the richer people. I really didn't think it applied to me, end quote. Well, Mr. President, as Ms. Richardson and many other hardworking Americans have discovered, the big, beautiful bill, the working families tax cuts, does indeed apply to them. It worked for them this tax season, and it will work for them in future tax seasons. Mr. President, in 2017, Republicans overhauled our outdated tax code so that it would work better for our economy and for American families alike. We cut tax rates across the board, doubled the child tax credit, and nearly doubled the standard deduction. And all of this made a significant difference to working families' tax bills. But this relief was scheduled to expire at the end of 2025, which meant that starting this January, Americans would have seen a lot more of their paychecks going to the federal government. Republicans were determined not to let that happen. And so last summer, we passed the Working Families Tax Cuts to prevent a massive $2.6 trillion tax hike on Americans making less than $400,000. But we didn't just prevent a tax hike. In addition to ensuring that Americans could keep enjoying lower tax rates, Americans passed a number of additional tax relief measures. We boosted the standard deduction. Again, we increased the child tax credit and linked it to inflation so that its value will never go down. We instituted no tax on tips. We instituted no tax on overtime, and more. And hardworking Americans are reaping the benefits. This tax season, more than 30 million seniors claimed the new bonus deduction for older Americans. More than 1 million taxpayers bought a new American-made car and were able to deduct an average $1,800 in auto loan interest on that new vehicle. More than 25 million American workers were able to deduct overtime pay from their taxes, resulting in substantial tax savings. And more than 6 million workers were able to deduct their tips from their taxes. And that doesn't even count the parents who were able to take advantage of the enhanced child tax credit or the new tax-advantaged accounts for their child. Or all of the Americans who benefited from our further increase in the standard deduction. Mr. President, the Working Families Tax Cuts is working for working families. The New York Times recently interviewed a number of taxpayers. The Times reported, and I quote, many of the taxpayers said they had received their largest refund in years, money that is going toward paying down credit card debt, catching up on bills, padding saving accounts, or covering the cost of a vacation, end quote. Money that is going toward paying down credit card debt, catching up on bills, padding savings accounts, or covering the cost of a vacation. Mr. President, that was our goal with this bill. To take some of the pressure off, to free up money that families could use to do things like pay down debt or put away for a rainy day or take a much-needed vacation. Thanks to the Working Families Tax Cuts, Americans now have a little more breathing room in their budgets. And whether we're passing tax relief, new measures to make prescription drugs more affordable at the pharmacy counter, or legislation to address the cost of housing, Republicans will continue to work to make life more affordable for hardworking Americans.
Schumer reacted to an article in The Atlantic about FBI Director Kash Patel, reported peace talks with Iran and more.
Mr. President, before I begin, I want to express my deepest and dearest sympathies for our friend Mark Warner, his wife Lisa, and the rest of their family as they mourn the terrible loss of their daughter Madison. I know how close the family was to Madison, and the depth of that loss is unfathomable. The Warner family should know that we are keeping them in our prayers. We are wishing them strength. May Madison's memory be a blessing. On Kash Patel, the American people expect competence from the President's cabinet, not the unmitigated and continuing chaos we see every day. Over the weekend, more damning reports about FBI Director Kash Patel's disorderly, drunken, and deranged behavior came to light. The Atlantic's reporting only confirmed what Senate Democrats have said from the start. Kash Patel is not simply unqualified. He's a grave risk to the rule of law and to American national security. I have called on Acting Attorney General Blanche to preserve all records, all communications, and other evidence regarding Kash Patel's dangerous behavior before the Trump administration tries to brush it under the rug. Again, we're calling on Acting Attorney General Blanche to preserve all records, communications, and other evidence regarding Kash Patel's dangerous behavior before the Trump administration tries to brush it under the rug. The Atlantic interviewed dozens of people who have observed Patel's erratic behavior, his excessive drinking. Apparently, Patel frequently misses key briefings and meetings because he's too hungover to attend. Patel's security detail often struggles to wake him up after his nights of partying, and once even had to ask for breaching equipment because Patel was unresponsive behind a locked door. All of this is made even worse by the reports of Kash Patel's constant jet-setting on the taxpayer's dime, his illegal crusade against Trump's political enemies, and his purge of countless counterintelligence officers who focused on Iran just days before Trump launched this reckless war. Americans deserve steady, sober leadership from their FBI director, and they're not getting it, it seems, in any way. Kash Patel's job is to protect the American people and our Constitution, not to party on the job. Patel must resign immediately. Every day he remains in office subjects America to serious and unnecessary risks. On Iran, Donald Trump continues to demonstrate that he has no plan to end his disastrous war of choice with Iran and no idea just how badly the American people are hurting because of it. Companies and airlines are charging Americans in Iran war surcharge. Mortgage rates are climbing. Gas is still over $4 a gallon. Over the weekend, Trump's energy secretary said that gas prices won't be normal until 2027. If you don't believe Chris Wright, believe Donald Trump. Trump said gas prices will, quote, be around the same or maybe even a little higher, his quote, by November. His words, not mine. Just the other day, Trump said that $4 for a gallon of gas is not very high. That's what he said. And that everything's doing really well. Really, Mr. President. Spoken like a man who doesn't have to fill up his own tank. Try telling the American people, who will spend an average of $740 more this year on gas because of this war, that, quote, everything's doing really well. And unfortunately and sadly, there's no end in sight. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Iran fired on commercial ships over the weekend. The U.S. seized an Iranian vessel According to Trump, J.D. Vance will be on his way to Pakistan soon, but it's unclear whether the Iranians will even agree to meet with him, let alone agree to open up the strait. 51 days into this war, and Donald Trump still does not have an objective, a strategy, an exit plan. The American people have questions. Congress must demand answers. Last week, Senate Republicans had their fourth opportunity to support our War Powers Resolution. And for the fourth time, Senate Republicans acquiesced to Donald Trump and gave this historic blunder their stamp of approval. Tomorrow, Senate Republicans will force a fifth vote on our War Powers Resolution. We will continue to force votes on our resolution every single week that Trump's war continues. The most important vote a senator can take is whether to go to war. Senate Republicans cannot sit on the sidelines while our service members are risking their lives on the front lines. I don't know how Trump's war will end, but I do know that Trump's war cannot end soon enough. On reconciliation, what does this majority choose to spend our time on instead? Any hour now, Republicans are expected to release a budget resolution that adds tens of billions of dollars to the national debt, pumps colossal sums into ICE and Border Patrol without any reforms at all, while doing absolutely nothing to lower costs for hardworking Americans. We need to pause and examine how we got to this moment. Because in a well-functioning Congress, the majority focuses on solving people's problems, not constantly cleaning up their own messes and shoveling tens of billions more into unaccountable rogue agencies. Remember last year in Donald Trump's big ugly betrayal, Republicans rammed through $75 billion for ICE and tens of billions more for Border Patrol with virtually no guardrails, minimal training standards, and no real idea of what they were unleashing? Well, that led to disaster, as could have been predicted. In January, federal immigration officers in Minneapolis murdered 2 American citizens in broad daylight, triggering a reckoning across the country. After the murders of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, the American people wanted change. Democrats told our Republican colleagues we needed to work together to rein in ICE and Border Patrol and prevent this kind of violence from happening again. We put forward common sense reforms modeled on guardrails law enforcement already follows in the states. No masked agents in unmarked vehicles, no bursting into people's homes without warrants, and body cameras for agents, all agents. But after weeks of back and forth, it became painfully obvious that Republicans were not serious about reform. Instead of listening to the people, Senate Republicans listened to Donald Trump and Stephen Miller. Even when Democrats offered to narrow the reforms to a small targeted set of proposals in exchange for funding, Republicans, afraid of Trump, afraid of Miller, said no. Leader Thune eventually brought a bill to the floor that would fund the rest of the Department of Homeland Security while leaving ICE and Border Patrol aside as negotiations on reforms continued. Democrats unanimously supported this bill. It was something we had been pushing for weeks because we believe FEMA, the Coast Guard, CISA, TSA, and the other core agencies of DHS must be able to serve the American people. But that agreement is now collecting dust in the House. Speaker Johnson and House Republicans refuse to move it. And that brings us to where we are today. It is Republicans who have chosen to keep FEMA, the Coast Guard, CISA, TSA, and all other DHS agencies shut down. It is Republicans' own divisions, their own inability to govern, that has led to the longest shutdown of an agency in American history. Even now, instead of working with Democrats, Republicans want to waste even more time by going at it alone through reconciliation. Any moment now, they're expected to release a budget resolution that would tee up more than $75 billion over 3 years for ICE and Border Patrol through reconciliation, while doing nothing, absolutely nothing, to lower costs for hardworking Americans. Let's be clear. What the Republicans are doing is not how a well-functioning Congress should be spending its time. We should be debating legislation to help people pay for groceries, afford the rent, bring down electric bills. We should be focused on outrageous gas prices and on retiring Donald Trump's costly military endeavors. Instead, Republicans are preparing to spend precious time bogging the Senate down in bipartisan bickering. And at a moment when President Trump claims we cannot afford Medicare or daycare, Republicans somehow think that we can give ICE and Border Patrol a blank check. Isn't that amazing? People are suffering because they can't pay for their health care needs. And instead, the Republicans want to send more money to ICE and Border Patrol. One thing is clear. One thing is very clear, Mr. President. Americans cannot afford the cost of Republicans' continued chaos. Finally, on Haiti, after spreading hateful, bigoted lies on the campaign trail, Trump continues to target the Haitian community as president. Despite ongoing violence, gang violence, civil instability, terrible medical infrastructure, and poor food access in Haiti, Trump directed Kristi Noem to strip Haitian immigrants of their TPS, their temporary protected status, disregarding the process Congress set into law. Last week, a bipartisan majority in the House, bipartisan, passed legislation on a discharge petition to extend temporary protected status for Haitian immigrants. In New York, home of the largest Haitian American community in the nation, we cherish our Haitian neighbors and value the many contributions they have made to America. I will do everything I can to protect the Haitian community. There are many Haitians in New York and beyond who anxiously await word on whether they will be forced to return to the dangerous circumstances they fled in Haiti. That is why I will Rule 14 this bill so that the Senate can give this issue the consideration that it deserves without delay. I urge Leader Thune to put this legislation on the floor. So, Mr. President, I understand that there's a bill at the desk, and I ask for its first reading.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the first time.
H.R. 1689, an act to require the Secretary of Homeland Security to designate Haiti for temporary protected status.
I now ask for a second reading, and in order to place the bill on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I object to my own request.
Objection is heard. The bill will be read for the second time on the next legislative day.
I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Be sure to watch FedNet TV on YouTube as the next reconciliation process unfolds. This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without express written permission from FedNet is prohibited.